Welcome back, Drone to 1K Season 7, Episode 3. Today, we're talking about agriculture. Super pumped to be talking to Brandon Beal of Elevation Aerial Application. He's got a great business doing crop spraying. And I know a lot of people are interested in agriculture and what that takes. So Brandon talks about how he got into this niche, the regulatory issues he faced. There is a lot of regulation involved in agriculture and pesticide and insecticide spraying. He walks through what that's like, how he was able to sort of get through that process, and then actually gives us some revenue numbers, talks about what he did in revenue his first year, what he's doing now. Now they're up to a number of different sprayer drones that they have running pretty continuously with a team of people. They focus on Christmas trees and row crops and a bunch of other stuff. So gonna be a super, super fun episode for you to listen to if you're interested in the agricultural aspects of drones and drone business. And I know that we always give away one type of course or discount in each episode. So for this week, we actually have a workshop on intro to drones and agriculture, taught by another person who's got a lot of experience in this field, Grant Puckrin. And so if you want that, the link will be in the description of this video or in the podcast, where you just type in the word podcast and you can get that workshop for just $1. It's a 50-minute workshop, normally priced at $49. The other thing is, if you want to leave us a review for this podcast, if you're enjoying it, if you hate it, whatever, if you want to leave a review, go to Apple Podcast, leave us a review, screenshot your review, and then send it to us, support@dronelaunchacademy.com, and we'll shoot you a t-shirt for taking the time to do that for us. Helps get the word out there about this podcast. All right, without further ado, let's dive in and hear from Brandon Beal. Welcome to another episode of the Drone to 1K podcast. Excited today to have my now friend, Brandon Beal, on the podcast. What's up, Brandon?
I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
So a lot of times I don't even know the podcast guests at all. Sometimes they've been friends of mine for a long time. You're sort of in the middle. We've chatted several times, and I love what you do. You've helped me understand a lot of stuff about sort of drones and agriculture. And then when we were coming up with guests for the new season, I was like, oh, shoot, I got to have Brandon on here. This guy's awesome. So glad you agreed to come on.
Well, I appreciate it. It's funny because, you say I helped you, but you helped me get into drones back in 2017. So when I started taking the Drone Launch Academy courses and doing things like that, that's, where it all started. So
Yeah,
both ways.
Well, I know a decent amount about you, but I don't know everything about you. So we'll dive into some stuff on the podcast for everyone. Why don't you start here with just how you got into drones in the first place? What led you to be like, hey, I'm going to start messing around with drones?
Yeah, I think my path was a little bit more unconventional. I started in aviation literally when I could walk, around helicopters. I think I told you, working for fairly sized charter corporations, helicopter operations that did charters, spraying, long line work, ENG, a multitude of things.
Real quick, because there's a lot of people on here who are not going to be familiar with any acronyms. So what is long line and what is ENG?
So long line is when you're actually using literally a long line off the bottom of a helicopter to move payloads or water. You see it a lot in firefighting. They use a lot of long lines to dump water on situations. And ENG is using helicopters with big cameras for media purposes. So CNN, all your local news stations, most of these run helicopters or share helicopters where they can go deploy, get the video they need and come back.
Gotcha. What does ENG stand for?
That's a good question. I don't know. My dad actually flies ENG, so he's always referenced it as ENG. It's just called news helicopters.
Gotcha. Okay. All right, cool. So you've been around aviation, helicopters.
So I was around aviation, helicopters, working for these companies. And around 2017, commercial drones started to come onto the market, especially for real estate, photography, things like that. Or that's when I started to pick up on it. So I decided right now what we're doing, especially in spraying, I thought it's critically important that we do it, but there's a lot of danger involved, from the pilot inside the helicopter, having to fly in and around power lines all day, having to fly with loads of 200, gallons of chemicals plus. It gets into some dangerous scenarios. And I always thought there's going to be a better way to do this in the future. And I think that drones are going to be a big part of that. So Yamaha had actually come out with a spray drone in the 2000s that first similarly kind of showed this and could spray, but it was all manual flight. Right. So it's going to be really hard to fly a drone FPV style almost and be spraying massive fields with this helicopter type setup. That just showed me the technology will come one day. I ended up getting my drone Part 107 license through Drone Launch Academy back in 2017, and I bought a small Parrot Anafi at the time. was just a small little camera drone, had a 4K camera on it. I went up and I started doing some real estate photography, and then I graduated onto the Parrot Bluegrass, which was a multispectral drone. Little
I've
did
heard of parrot bluegrass. What is
Yeah.
that?
So it's a multispectral drone that Parrot came out with for a small time, that had a sunshine sensor and a multispectral sensor on the bottom to do NVDI and multispectral readings on farms.
All right, another question. Definitely familiar with multispectral. What is a sunshine sensor?
So the sunshine sensor sits on top of the drone to account for how much sun is coming down onto the plant that day. So if it's a more cloudy day versus, no clouds, completely sunny, it would differentiate those within its algorithm.
Interesting. Okay, never heard that before. All right, so this parrot drone had both these sensors you're saying?
Yeah, yeah. And it was really awesome. The thing I didn't know at the time is using a multispectral drone in Orlando was going to be a little bit harder than I had thought, especially when we're trying to map vegetation and things like that. So I think that was my first step into the business of drones and stuff like that. I did that for a while. And I ended up kind of going back towards traditional flying, going to start my pilot's license for fixed wing, walking through that. And during that time, I had actually moved from Orlando. This was during COVID, from Orlando up to Galax, Virginia. So I moved from super populated town to a town with truly not a lot of people and a lot of farmland.
What brought you up there?
I actually had some family who had lived up here. And I think with COVID happening, all the downtime, me getting laid off, I was sitting there going, I want to reach my goals. And am I going to reach the goals that I want to achieve in life, especially being spraying with drones here in Orlando? And the answer to me was no. So really one day I woke up and I was like, hey, I'm going to move up to Virginia. And I moved up to Virginia and I've been going ever since.
Sweet. Okay.
And then I moved up here and I was actually fortunate enough to meet my business partner in the gym. And I think for business, a lot of the times people think that, it's just move up somewhere or just open the doors and start. And for me, it was a little bit different. I heard you talk about this on other podcasts. Some mental hiccups. You're transitioning as a young guy from this high school era time into your college years and what you're going to do for a career. And that leaves, I think, a lot of people, plus myself, going, what do I want to do for my career? I don't want to go to college personally and take on a lot of debt that I don't know that that career, that degree is going to be used when I get out. That's why we had gone to the drones and done a lot of things like that. But when I moved up here, started working out, started getting in a real strong mental mind space. I think that was a huge defining factor for me in a lot of my business that I don't talk about a lot. And through doing that, becoming more mentally fit, stuff like that, timing's everything. Around that same time, my best friend actually owns the gym. It's a nonprofit for police first responders. I was able to go there with him. I showed him this drone and I was like, hey, I think this is the first commercially, spray drone that we could actually use, commercially available that we can use, that we can scale with some. It's not perfect, but we can really start using this and making money. My partner's name is Caleb. And at the time, he had no clue of even what a drone was really, much less about what a spray drone does. So,
What drone was it that you were referencing?
we were looking at the Agras T40 right when it came out. So as soon as the T40 came out, I think it was in December 2022, going into 2023 is when it released. And we were like, this is going to be it. So we started talking about it, started doing some real deep dives, talking with some of the companies that were selling them. And we were able to get a loan and go get our first one. And that was a huge step for me, from going from a guy who wanted to fly helicopters, wanted to own, I was looking up to the bosses that I was working for at the time in the helicopter industry and always wanted to work up to that. I wanted to be able to control aircraft or drones and a fleet style management and have them going out doing jobs and coming back. So yeah, that's basically when we got the T40 and started into agriculture.
Now those things are pretty pricey. I don't know. I know they've come out with some new ones since then, but how much was the T40 when you purchased it back a few years ago?
The T40, I want to say for the actual drone, it was only around 20,000. What they
You
don't
gotta get
tell
a bunch of
you,
other stuff, right?
yeah. So you got to get a bunch of other
We
stuff
did
being,
think about this.
yeah, the batteries, the controller, the tanks, and then really all of the trailer, the PPE, the tanks, because not only were we buying the drone for this time, you're buying all the mixing equipment for the chemicals, which for us was really, really different. It's not like me and Caleb had gone and been mixing chemicals every year like a lot of farmers do. They're very used to mixing chemicals every year. So something new to us, how to make these tanks, how to create these setups to be functional going in and out of fields.
And
Super important.
when you say make these tanks, you're not talking about the tanks that the drone has on it, you're talking about, like, the tanks where you're storing the chemicals and moving them from that to the drone?
Yeah, and to give you a little bit on that, how we typically set up a trailer is with what we call a holding tank. So the holding tank only holds water, right? That's the water that we use all day to push out through the drone. And then connected to that holding tank, we have a cone tank. We call it our mixing tank. And the mixing tank is actually where we induce the chemical. So we'll fill, say we have a 100-gallon cone tank, we'll fill it 50 gallons full of water, and then we'll put the chemical in. Then we'll introduce the next 50 gallons of water to make sure that we can have it mixed. We have agitators on there that can keep it circulating and stuff like that. And then from that holding tank, the mixing tank, it goes out the bottom and up actually on top of our trailer where we have a landing platform for the drone.
Okay. Forgive my ignorance when it comes to ag and chemicals and all this stuff. This is not my day-to-day by any means. The chemicals that you're using, are these, like, other liquid chemicals that you're mixing with water? Are they, like, solid and they dissolve in the water? What is that like normally?
So there's actually both. We spray a lot of pesticides, and pesticides is a general term, right? It covers insecticides, fungicides, herbicides, and rodenticides. And primarily, we deal with herbicides and sometimes insecticides, sometimes on Christmas trees. But most of the time, we're trying to kill for broadleaves and stuff like that. And the chemicals can come in solid or liquid form, depending on how harsh they are, the quantities that you have to use, the concentration in that chemical. You might have one chemical, but under 3 different brand names, it has different concentrations to do different things slightly.
Gotcha. Okay. So, can you give us a ballpark of, like, drone, trailer setup, tank setup, all that stuff? Like, so let's say someone out there is like, "I'm gonna go do, like, a legit spraying business, 1 drone, trailer with all the fixins." What is that, like, gonna set somebody back typically?
Around 50,000 is, I think, a loan amount. You'll cover the 30,000, you'll cover, your drone, that whole setup, and then the other 20 is left for your business license, your pesticide licenses, and,
Like, the
your
trailer alone.
trailer. Yeah, trailer
It's
components.
not as horrific as I was thinking. So you'll spend more. I think I spent that amount of money in my first year of college trying to get my pilot's license going to a private school.
Yeah, exactly, and when you look at it compared to some of the LiDAR setups, like a really nice LiDAR setup and stuff, it's really for how many use cases we can get out of this drone, I feel like it would be a lot harder for me around my area to find LiDAR use cases than it is for agricultural.
You can spend easily 50K on just a LiDAR sensor.
Yeah.
So you mentioned you got a loan, like a $40,000 loan, something like that.
Mhm.
What is that process like? Did you go to a bank and was like, "Hey, I want to start a drone spraying business. Can I get like SBA financing?" Or what was that like?
I did, and actually the bank thought it was really cool. They thought it was a really cool idea. Sadly for me, I just didn't have the business history that I needed through the other businesses that, I'd stepped away from business, gone and worked for a while, then moved up here. So we actually couldn't get a loan through the bank. We got rejected for that loan.
And to be honest, that doesn't surprise me. I know getting bank financing, like banks are very risk averse, which is why SBA, like they can get government guarantees, but then there's this whole host of other stuff you got to go through. So I know that that's a pretty complicated process. So that doesn't shock me. So what did you go with?
It was, and it can actually be a big hit to the system, right? Especially when this is a big dream of yours. You're heavily reliant on getting this money. Like it's going to dictate a lot of your future. I mean, it's everything. Hearing that no, it comes back and it's crushing. What was big for us was me and Caleb, my business partners, going out and continuing to ask people, continuing to talk to people that we knew about the idea, about what we were trying to do and stuff like that. And fortunately for us, we came across a private lender who would give us the money at, a regular interest rate, just like a bank would. And we just put up the drones and some of that stuff if something went wrong. And yeah, as collateral and a little bit of money that we had saved up, a lot less than the bank was offering. And we were actually able to get that 50, get the drone and start flying.
Awesome. So you got a 50 grand loan.
Yeah.
And then, well, how long, like, what were the terms of that? Like, where's it, I guess, because I mean, you got to get it to where you're like, all right, I got to make sure I got manageable payments on this as I'm starting things up.
Yeah, so that was a big consideration for us. The thing that worked for us is we were actually able to get the first year interest only. So only paying interest the first year, and then the second year doing interest plus principal, starting to pay down that note slowly. And just making sure, I think that's the big thing of business, is making sure that we could go get the business to support it. A lot of people getting into the ag space, as well as you guys called someone, you talked to someone for a while, you got to look these things up online. When we were buying our drone, there was the videos coming out from DJI. That was it. That was completely it. So you're actually throwing this money. You can never see it demoed. You can't see it flown. We actually got the drone the first night and we had it in one of Caleb's fields. And I remember we're both sitting there and we're trying to figure out how to take it off, like how to get it to trigger just to turn on, because it just doesn't come with information like that. It doesn't come with the how-to tutorials of how to do this. And it's a little bit more complex than just your standard Mavic 3 or something like that. The cautions, the systems, how the profiles work and stuff. It's managing a lot through that DJI. They call it the Agras management platform.
Honestly though, it's not that I necessarily, I really respect people who have the risk tolerance to go out and like get a loan or toss something on a credit card, like my buddy Jeff. If you listen back earlier, back in some of the podcast episodes, Jeff Carrillo, he wanted similar story, but he was trying to get into thermography. And I think the drone at the time was like, yeah, it was expensive. It was maybe 20 grand. It was like tens of thousands. And dude, he threw it on a credit card, 1 year, like time frame or even, I don't know if it was like no payments for the first year or if it was just 0% interest for the first year, something like that. But he did that. And I'll tell you what, there's no motivation like having to get it done or had bad things happen to you. So,
And there's
uh,
not. It's how bad do you want it, you know? How bad do you really want that opportunity for yourself? How bad do you really want to execute on it? And I think most people would be surprised that they can figure out some sort of deal, some sort of way. I was actually on a phone call with one of the larger beyond visual line of sight companies, and they sell a drone that's upwards of $240,000 at the door right now. And you would think a lot of people getting that message would just go, okay, well, I can't buy this right now, right? A lot of companies are looking to rent to own, to do things like that, to do leases, to do demos, to get work out there because they need to get their drones out there. So anyone listening, I would definitely recommend going, asking those companies, really keep pushing. And until you hear a yes, just keep taking the no's.
just try to be creative. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, kudos to you for getting it done, right? You didn't just go, well, bank said no, I guess that's over with. So you got someone to take a risk on you, which is cool. And honestly, I've probably had what, 4 or 5 conversations with this point. Every time I talk to you, I'm like, you can just tell when you talk to someone, you're like, this guy's got passion for it and they're like dedicated to it. They're going to figure it out. So I'm sure that came through when you were talking to them. So,
Yeah. Thank you.
all right, cool. So you got your money, you go buy your drones, you get your trailer set up. I'm sure there's a lot of work through figuring that out. Talk us through how long it took or the process of getting your first customer, because you're contracting with farmers to spray their stuff. Is that the business model basically?
That is
Like
the
your crop
business
dog.
model. That is. And again, let's go back in the conversation. We're asking farmers to give us what feeds their family, right? To maintain, we're asking them to allow us to maintain their crop that feeds their family throughout the year. That's a big ask. I mean, that's a huge ask. And that was a huge fear for us, especially me moving up to this town where I know my business partner, a handful of people, and that's it.
Now you didn't know your
Um,
business partner when you moved up there, right? You met his person at the gym?
yes, the gym that he owns, it's actually called Curtis Bartlett Fitness. It's a nonprofit for first responders to always be fit to serve. And I had started working out with them. I love the mission. I started training with Caleb, and through that we became, I mean, just best friends. And
Okay, and then it kinda developed into this, "Hey, let's do this business." But you said one of his fields, does he have crops that he grows?
so he actually has a family horse farm. So,
Okay.
they
Just
have
breeding horses?
they got 10 horses off in a field, and then we have a small little field that's sectioned off with our hangar, our office space. So
Okay.
back then, it wasn't our office and our hangar space. It was just a flatter field that they have that we could use to go test fly, to
Oh,
go
gotcha.
spray
Okay.
some water. And
Yeah, okay, okay.
but to
You did
answer your question on how long it took for this process, when we had gotten the drone, it took about, I want to say a month and a half to get all of our paperwork submitted. So that being our N number registration for the drone, that took multiple weeks to come back. And anyone listening, if you get one check, you check the wrong box anywhere, anything, all that paperwork's coming back to you. and you're going to the bottom of the list.
Cycle starts all over. Yeah.
Exactly. So we actually had to do that twice, got our N number, and then you can apply for your 44807. We were able to do that, and to do that, then we had to wait for our 137, which took about 30 days, I want to say,
Okay.
which wasn't that bad. The
To
long
be honest, faster than I would have thought, honestly.
Yeah, there's some people who had holdups. I mean, I've heard of people having 6, 9 month holdups for getting their registration, everything like that through. For us, it just wasn't that long, luckily.
Now, real quick, I don't want to spend way too much time on this, but because we could probably have two podcast episodes about the paperwork and legal process for ag stuff. But just briefly, N number is because the drone is above 55 pounds. So you got to have an exemption. Basically, you have to have like an N number, like an aircraft, right?
Yeah, I mean, it is. It's under the same aircraft registry. Like, if you go look up your plane's N number, that's our drone's listed under there.
Yeah. So it's instead of like, your regular drone registration gives you a little bit of some number you're supposed to stick on there. I guess that's the equivalent, but all regular aircraft, like when I got my private pilot license, every aircraft has a tail number on it. So this is your drone's tail number. And then what's the 137 for?
The 137 is the license to dispense economic poisons from an aircraft. And we talked about that before, that being anything that comes out of the drone that affects the ground underneath it.
This sounds so severe. Okay.
It does. It does. It sounds super serious.
And that's a federal thing you have to get.
Yeah, so that's the 44807 and the 137 are through the FAA. Now we have then on the state side, the state applicator license, the state business license, and then we also have to show insurance for the state pesticide license.
That's a lot of licenses and stuff to get. Sorry, I was just Googling some 44807 stuff. So the 44807, that's basically that's covering your like 55-pound exemption and all that stuff.
Yeah, so the 44807 covers a lot of our rules that we're supposed to follow. It's actually like a docket like that thick, and each page says how we're supposed to do our reporting every month, how we're supposed to let the FAA know where we're flying with our NOTAMs, everything like that's outlined in that document. And then the 137 is physically just a piece of paper that's your certificate, and all your rules under that are really under the FAR and stuff like that.
Gotcha. Okay. So you get all your, I mean, again, we could dive way into that, but I just wanted to let people know there's probably more regulatory stuff to go through on ag spraying than any other drone niche or operation that exists. So on the plus side, good barrier to entry because that gets a lot of people who don't want to do it. On the negative side, it's a lot of paperwork. Also on the negative side, there's going to be people who are just like, government can't tell me what to do. I'm just going to go out there and start spraying everything inside with whatever I want. We talked a little bit about that too. And actually was at a conference and I talked to someone like, yeah, I was thinking about, this wasn't even a drone conference. This was like an educator conference. And there was a teacher who came up and was like, yeah, they were from the Midwest. Like, yeah, I got a lot of farmers in my area. I might want to do this for ags, for like spraying stuff. I was like, oh, that's really cool. But just so you know, it's a pretty hefty regulatory process. So just be ready for that. And the guy's like, no, I'll just do it under the table and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I wouldn't do that if I were you, but okay.
Well, it really drives me because a lot of times what people aren't thinking of, and people didn't think of this back in 2017, is when they were doing their aerial photography, who else is flying around? I always took it more personal because my stepdad flew helicopters and stuff like that, the drone can't see and avoid, right? People flying up thinking, I can just fly up to 400 feet, or I can just go spray this farm. I don't need anyone's permission. Like, yeah, from a spraying standpoint, sure, the state probably won't come crazy after you. But from a federal standpoint, you're putting other people's lives unjustly at risk for what? I mean, truly to get a good photo.
But I mean, I don't know. State could come after you for spraying stuff out, right? I mean, if you're spraying chemicals everywhere and there's some liability with, I don't know. There's always liability in everything you do. So it's just kind of how you balance that risk, I guess, in your mind.
Exactly.
All right. I didn't mean to go down that road there, but all right, you got your regulatory stuff done. Now you're getting your first customer. How long did that take? What was that process like?
That process was, like I said, interesting because I didn't know anyone up in this area. I didn't know any farmers. So for me and Caleb both, Caleb knew a few farmers, but then the next question is, where do we start? Through doing research, a lot of colleges have something called extension programs, and there's ag extension agents in almost every town of a farming community that are based for that local area. And some of them are even niched out to be like, we have one extension agent who's really good at Christmas trees. We have another one that's really good at row crops. And you can use those people, one, to show new technology and connect with farmers, but two, to get recommendations on what you're supposed to be doing, how to treat a field. A lot of the times you would think the farmer would know, I need to spray this. They don't. They're looking to you, they're looking to the extension agents because year to year, you're fighting different problems.
The extension agencies like universities, like ag programs at universities and colleges.
Yeah, so like Virginia Tech Extension. So Virginia Tech has an extension program and they have extension agents in every county almost over Virginia that you can contact. So we contacted our local extension agent, Kevin. He was super awesome. He met with us. We showed him. He goes, I really like this. I think it's cool. As I'm talking around to farmers, I will let them know, do you guys have a card? Things like that. And then we started doing an immense amount of demoing for free, going to Tree Farmer Association meetings, going to literally any type of meeting, soil and water conservation, anyone we can get in front of, let's go demo the drone and show them the capabilities. So through doing that, we got our first base of a few customers. And then we had actually gone to the local sheriff who Caleb was friends with and said, hey, we're looking for to get into with some of the tree farmers because little do people know this Virginia, North Carolina region is one of the most dense regions in the United States for Christmas trees.
After you told me that, I saw another infographic on like, Instagram or something. Now, obviously, they're always listening to your conversations. They're like, oh, Dave's into Christmas trees. Shows, but I saw this infographic that said like, where do the world's Christmas trees come from? And you're right, they're in like small pockets of areas, and like you're saying, like Virginia, North Carolina was like one of the highest percentages, and somewhere out in the West was another block. But yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, there's a huge amount of Christmas trees. I mean, there's one farmer here that has over 10,000 acres of Christmas trees alone. I mean, that's a lot of Christmas trees. We were able to get a meeting with one of those companies and go in and show them the product. They liked it, they liked us, and we went into a testing phase. So we went with them, some of their head guys, went to a tree farm, and actually at the tree farms, we're not spraying, we're fertilizing. Now, little did I know at the time this was going to be our biggest niche market. This is our biggest niche market, and for a few reasons. Christmas trees right now predominantly are managed by H2A workers. So migrant labor. So every year, I mean, you're not talking like 100 into this area. You're talking literally thousands of migrant laborers coming into this area to do fertilizing, spraying, and chopping of trees. So through this process, we were actually able to take a fair amount of the migrant laborers out of the field for the entire fertilizing season, right? Until we could build to be able to maintain all of their acres in a set amount of time. Because a big thing with spray, fertilizer, it's all about time periods, right? So for Christmas trees, I only have about a month and a half to get 700, 800 acres done. It's a lot. We're throwing high pounds per acre. It's very long days during Christmas tree fertilizing season. So through the drone, we were actually able to take their total consumption of fertilizer and reduce it by 30%.
Mm.
For
Now, why is that? Because it's just going in like a more accurate places or something?
Yeah, I mean, the drone doesn't get lazy, right? The drone doesn't get tired, and the Christmas trees are planted on the craziest terrain. I mean, hillsides, everything you can imagine, and these people walk around with 50-pound backpacks full of fertilizer, and they
Like
literally
spillage and stuff and
they hand
not
throw
good
it all
distribution.
day. So the consistency, even though they've done some really good techniques, they have these little bowls on their hands that kind of measure out little bits. Still overall, those guys get tired, they want to dump a little bit out, things like that. So we're able to give
Like,
these
leans over. Let me soften this little bit.
literally. So, we're able to take them out for that season, bring the drones in, the drones do all the heavy work, and we still use a certain amount of migrant laborers to help us move fertilizer around, help us station, help us load drones and things like that, while also being able to take a lot of that money that would go out of the local communities, out of the states even, back into different countries and keep it here, keep it going to families in the town, our employees, things like that. And so we worked into Christmas trees, especially with fertilizer. That's a huge season for us, 3 months of
Okay.
the year. And then
3 months of the year, you said?
yeah, 3 months of
Okay.
the year.
Okay.
And then we move over to spraying. And spraying, we spray Christmas trees and corn and pasture primarily.
What do you spray pasture for?
Broadleaves. So broadleaves are a type of weed that grow when soil pH isn't in its recommended zone. So one of the things that we've seen in farming overall is soil quality, things like that that you probably hear about, a healthier version, more sustainable version of farming. What we do is we actually spray for these broadleaves because say you have a 10-acre farm, 5 acres of that farm is taken up in briars and broadleaves and stuff like that. The cattle and other animals that work through those areas don't like eating broadleaves. It's not nutritional. It's not good for them. It's just like a human. You get in what you put out, or you get out what you put into your body. Same thing with the cattle and stuff like that. So we try to maintain those weed areas, better grass grow, throw lime. We do a lot of lime. I don't know if you've heard of that. That helps the soil pH so that grass can grow. There's all these little sub-services off of just spraying.
Yeah. Okay. Now, so you spray pasture, so the cattle, and I'm guessing you're spraying stuff that the cattle can go eat, or safe to
Yeah.
be around, or else they wouldn't have you spray it there.
Yes.
I guess because in my mind, like the untrained consumer, you think someone's spraying pesticides must mean no one can step foot on that ground for like 2 months or something, and you're like, oh yeah, we're just spraying pasture where cattle's walking around, and you're like, oh, I guess that's whatever you're putting there is fine.
Well, yeah, and it's the chemicals that you're using and the crops. Like, does that same parable that you just talked about go over into corn? No. Like, after we spray a cornfield, I'm not going back and walking through that cornfield and stuff until after the re-entry interval. And those are actually all the re-entry intervals for any chemical is mandated by the pesticide label. And you'll hear people talk about this a lot. Label is law. So the pesticide label literally is whatever it says is the law.
Okay. So what's that period typically like if you're spraying cornfields?
About 24 to 48 hours
Oh,
is
okay.
general, and then when you go back in, you still have to have the PPE on for residues and things like that. The biggest time where we're worried about, like, the actual pesticide itself is really in the mixing phase, right? Because that's when we're
High
dealing with
concentration.
we're straight concentrate, and you're pouring that into water. When it's in the water, I mean, you might be using a couple gallons of concentrate to 100 gallons of water. Now, still, we don't bathe in this, but it's not something that we're freaking out about as much or
I'm
something
just
like that.
picturing you like suited up with these vats, like Breaking Bad style, like mixing the.
That's basically how it is during corn season sometimes. Yeah.
All right. So so you do Christmas tree fertilizing, you do spraying. Do you do a Christmas tree, corn, and pasture spraying? Is that all sort of in the same time of the year?
Christmas trees, corn, pasture all happen throughout the summer months, right? So anywhere from when it starts to heat up from 50 degrees all the way down to when it gets back to around 50 degrees, we'll kind of start slowing down again.
Is there a period where there's just like no real activity going on where you do other stuff, like, business cycle wise?
Yeah, so I mean, that's right now. Our typical season is from March, we'll start, and we'll go all the way to November. And then we'll have December, January, February. And really, for me, those are prep months, right? That's where I'm going and I'm breaking down our weather analysis. These drones, we can't fly in the max wind speeds that you can with a Mavic 3 or a different type of drone for photography. Our actual max out wind speed on these drones is around 15, 20 miles per hour.
Is that just because of what's spraying out of them or what the drone can handle?
I think it's really what the drone can handle, especially with terrain. If we're working down a mountain, we can get into something called settling with power, where we're kind of falling into our own downwash. So we have to be careful for these things, especially when it comes to winds and things like that. If you're going to the bottom of a hill and also trying to do a 0 point turn, the wind can get up under that bottom blade and really start to push the drone up farther than it should be going on its angle of access.
Now, my next question is, have you ever wrecked one of these expensive drones?
We've had a what we would call a hard landing. One hard landing, definitely back. It was during our first season, where we ended up actually just something. We were flying the drone, we had taken off, and one of the engines just gave out, and it just went doop, boom.
Mm.
And
That's because of a deep manufacturer thing, or is that a maintenance thing, or what?
it's really hard to tell. One of the things that I'm seeing on these drones that I've never seen with drones before is the ability to repair them and actually have so many crucial components that you can replace. This drone, I can take it fully apart, every board, every connection, every cable, and replace it. So the arms, the legs, the internal avionics panels.
It's a lot more
um,
modular than like, Mavic Air 2.
Exactly, but it's not always modularly easy, right? So, sometimes you have like we found out this year when we'd store the drones overnight, sometimes in our lights, literally the little red and green lights, those are a huge data pulling area for us, for our motors. Right? They take data from the motors where the rotors are spinning, takes them into the light components, it has a big computer board in there, and then shoots it down to our avionics board. Now we were in that connection getting water trapped overnight from the air condensing, and that little bit of water inside of there would stop the engines from turning when we went to fly in the morning.
Because the whatever the signal
Yeah, just
through a light?
yeah, just it throws a relay because it can sense water in there to not start the drone because that could be a problem. So every day for that, we'd have to take part of the drone apart, spray air inside of it to where it was super, super just as dry as we could get any moisture out of there, close everything back up, and repeat this cycle until we could get the blades to start. And people were having these issues all over the country. It wasn't just us.
I'm sure as they have these out longer, they'll remedy that and
Well,
get it out.
exactly, and small little things like that. I mean, we're dealing with highly corrosive materials, spraying every day. If you go and do a day of fertilizer, a day of lime, or a day of spray, and you don't come back and give it a wipe down, your camera, your FPV camera on it will be totally corroded within a week, and it won't function anymore. I mean, it'll corrode through the metal, it'll lock up all the mechanisms for the FPV, and there's countless parts on the drone that operate with that same principle of if you don't wash it, it's gonna corrode.
So this is an actual legit drone where I mean, because you always hear about like, oh, maintenance protocols on drones. But in reality, like most consumer drones people are flying, like if you have a Mavic 3 Pro, your maintenance protocol is like, are the propellers broken?
Yeah.
No? Okay. Like, does the gimbal move around? Like, it's not really like when you're flying a plane, you're doing pre-flight inspections and stuff. But it sounds like, these machines, there's a lot more complexity to where actually maintenance is a large factor in that thing working well.
Yeah, so during our hot times, which is really corn, like corn's like a really go, go, go time. Actually, every single night when the drones are done flying for the day, they come back to the hangar and they go into maintenance overnight. So washing them down, looking at different parts that are broken, looking at the actual spray nozzles, everything that we need to check, we go through doing maintenance records. And with these, we fall, like you said, under a different set of rules. We actually have to maintain maintenance records on all of the drones for every part that we replace, any action we do.
It sounds just like a regular, I mean, again, going through like flight training, like whatever, a decade or two ago. It sounds very similar to like if you have actual aircraft that people are going to be in, where you're like these type of standards with maintenance and things like that.
It is, and I think that's why I talk about so much my, background being from traditional aviation or traditional operations, because a lot of those principles that I learned there go over into elevation every single day, from maintenance to operational flow to pilots to training of pilots, all
And you
of
said
those
Elevation.
things.
That's your business name, right? Sorry, I didn't even
Yeah,
at
yeah,
the beginning. What's the official name of your business?
elevation aerial application.
Okay, cool. So you got your first customers. Now, are you comfortable sharing like what this business pays? Like, I don't think people even know like how much you get paid to spray, and I'm sure it's an expensive operation to run. So I imagine that it's not cheap to spray for someone. Like, what does that? However much you're comfortable sharing, what does that look like?
Yeah, so actually, I was able to save up a little bit from working other jobs and stuff before to take a year off. So the whole goal of that year was to put everything we make back into the business. Now, around our first year, we did around 50,000 our first year
Revenue?
in revenue,
Okay.
and stuff. And then I think this year we finished out around 170 or
Okay.
180. So we doubled off last year.
Is
Now
this your second year in business?
this is our second year in business.
Okay. Cool.
And we're running 3 T40s now. We run them full time. And I think for us, this year was a huge learning year. Year two was running one drone. It's three of us running every single day, right? My base crew. As we run three drones, you have different crews moving out. We went from operating every day of the week by ourselves to every day with multiple crews, multiple people, and a lot of operational requirements. I think was a huge learning curve on management for me, and systems and processes, refining our processes. And honestly, with the same amount of drones next year, I hope to double our income. I really think it's possible.
I believe you, man. Just again, from talking to you a few times, seeing the passion you have for it, seeing how knowledgeable you are about it. And if people are looking to be like, what should I be like as an entrepreneur to make it or doing anything in the industry of drones? I feel like you're a good example of it as get super knowledgeable and super good at it and work really hard to make it happen. And, that's all the people I've seen that work well. That's it. Either people usually lack the curiosity to really understand it really well and how to be very good at it and effective, or they lack sort of the business risk appetite, you know what I mean? Of like being uncomfortable, just going out and talking to everybody and like that kind of thing. So I think you have a great combo of this.
And that was me. Like, that was 100% me a couple years ago. I was very much reserved in my shell, scared to make those moves, scared to get uncomfortable. And big pat on the back to Caleb, my business partner. He's been a huge help. But getting to the gym, doing those things, taking control of your mind, your body, everything like that dictates what you can do in your business. If you can get uncomfortable in the gym space or do something like that, I can go ask to make some money with a product that actually works, right? I think it's a good trade-off there.
And
And
you're
a lot of
motivating me to try to go work out now. I'm like, oh, I haven't been at the gym in a long time. Brandon's on something. You know, a funny stat I saw. Again, this was probably some Instagram. This was some Instagram post. So they looked at CEOs that lift heavy weights on a regular basis. First off, I don't know how they know that necessarily, but then they correlated it to like, oh, they said, oh no, if you were to create a stock like portfolio and you only chose companies that were led by CEOs
I
who
saw
lift
this.
heavy weights, did you see
Yes,
this?
yes.
It would have outperformed like SP 500, all these technology indexes and all this stuff. And I was like, that's interesting. I don't know if it's just a coincidence, but it was interesting.
Yeah, sadly, I'm not the CEO that's, pushing heavyweights, but I'm just pushing weight.
Or maybe, I don't know if it's heavy, but some type of like workout
No,
mentioned.
yeah, just very fit individuals, and I think that premise does go. It's a mind-body connection, and we've seen it across, Caleb runs multiple other businesses and stuff. We work together on other things, and it's a huge principle of getting uncomfortable, getting out there, and like you said, getting knowledgeable on something. A master of everything is a master of nothing.
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah. Well, like you like kind of zoned in on how can I really help farmers? And you have to know enough to convince them to, like you said, it's like a big deal for them to hand over that responsibility to you. And people, there's risk in any transaction with anyone, right? So if like a farmer is like, how much do I want to trust this person to do this as a risk? So the more knowledgeable and you can show yourself to be and trustworthy, right? That reduces their risk. Even if you reduce it down to something maybe that seems less risky, like real estate, right? Like you're not going to really do damage with a smaller drone necessarily, but the real estate agent's risking wasting their time. They're risking looking bad to their, client or whatever. So the more knowledgeable you can be about that, the more you reduce the risk for your customer in their mind of working with you. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the stepping stones was not going to ask the farmer, "Hey, can we spray 10,000 acres of your corn?" That I think a lot of people would take that approach, and what it takes to actually spray those 10,000 acres or 5,000 acres is operationally insane. So we said, "Hey, we have this technology. We think long term it can really, really work for you. Give us 100 acres this year. Let us test with you this year on this 100 acres. Let's record the data and see if we can do more. 9 times out of 10, before we're even done with the season, we've done more than that 100 acres, right? They've
That-
gone, they've seen it. They see, okay, they didn't. If you have 1,000 acres, you can handle, you don't want to, but you can handle losing 50, 25 of it because of a bad spray application. You can't risk losing the whole field.
yeah. Well, that's great. That's just a great example of reducing. How can I reduce the risk for this person to do business with me? So
Yeah, barriers to entry are huge, especially for farmers who and I don't think realized how much the farmer, like not for the application or anything, but the farmer's spending on these chemicals, these fertilizers, these inputs onto their farm.
like how much you're spending money wise or
Yeah,
time or what?
yeah, money and time. I mean, they have us come out to save their time on that part, but the amount that they spend on actual chemical to treat their fields It's insane. No farmer wants to do it. It's truly based out of necessity for the quality of the crop.
Yeah. Now, question on the business sort of operation side. Does it work where the farmer buys the chemicals, they provide them to you, and then you're just the applicator, or do you have to go out and buy the chemicals and all that stuff?
Yeah, so that's a huge thing. When I'm going to a Christmas tree field, I'm not showing up. I don't have the manpower. I don't have the truck capacity. We've done around 12 one-ton bags in a day between two teams before. So you're talking
24,000 pounds?
exactly. You're talking 12 tons of product. We can't pull that through a field, right? So our deals with some of these farmers are you guys get your product, get it to the field. When we get to the field, we'll take it, we'll mix it. We have a few farmers, especially when it comes to spray, that their fields are spread out everywhere. So at the beginning of the season, we'll take in their chemical and we'll store it. That way, if we find a good day, like, hey, it's bad weather up here, but right down in North Carolina in this section, we have really good weather. We'll just load up the chemical and send them on their way.
Gotcha. Interesting. You don't do much now with like multispectral analysis and some of that other sort of plant health analysis stuff, right? You kind of stick to just the spraying route.
We do. It's just right now, because you have to send one drone to one field to do that, the cost for the farmer on the return of what they'll get, a lot of farmers don't want to do it yet. They're not fully convinced. Now, when we talk about that beyond visual line of sight, where I can fly one drone and hit 10 different properties in a defined area, farmers will jump on them, we believe, because the cost will come down. They love the technology. It's just to
That makes
replicate
sense.
that for them to make it sustainable in their company, it's going to cost them right now.
I got you. Okay. Someone's a business, individual, enterprise, school looking at this, want to use drone technology in ag. What's your biggest sort of parting words of wisdom for them?
I'd say start small and get a grounding. Go, like I said, meet with the extension agents, talk to the farmers. The need in a lot of area is there. And when you know definitively that there's need, I think a lot of the other stuff will figure itself out. Where am I going to get the money from? If you have that little bit of drive and you're really excited to do it, go start taking those first steps. And one of the things, don't be hard pressed on your vision, right? Your vision is your vision, but what gets you to that vision, how you get there, can change 1,000 times along the way. We spray, but a week ago I was looking at RFID tags that we could attach to cattle and take RFID readings from the cattle. I know that some kid out there, that will be his starting place because there's a huge market for that in itself, and then he'll work into spraying. So it's, I think, figuring out where your passion is around that sector, starting to hone in on that, go get it in front of everyone. If you're not getting it in front of everyone, you're not doing yourself justice.
Love it. Cool. All right. And last thing is, where can people find your stuff or see more about you? Maybe like, I don't know, website, social media, where do you live online?
Yeah, so a lot of our socials are elevation.aerial. If you look up elevation aerial application, a lot of stuff will come up. And then I post a lot of articles about talking about agricultural fleet management, how we do some of our operations on my personal LinkedIn at Brandon Beal.
Okay. Where are you most active? LinkedIn?
I'd say LinkedIn. I write quite a few articles on things that I'm seeing in the industry and stuff like that.
Cool. Do you do much on your website or not really?
Yeah, we actually are going through a revamp on our website right now. One of the things that I'm building out right now, and we'll start right after this again, is our client portal. So we're actually introducing an entirely new experience for our farmers and farmers that work around us. Farmers are going to be able to sign up, make accounts, and have a history of where their fields are, all the obstructions on their field, the acreage of their field. They'll be able to request services, request application records, everything like that for a full online profile.
Nice. That's great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Brandon, thanks so much for coming on and doing this. This is the first sort of full-on ag operation I think we've had on the Drone to 1K. So I was excited to get you on and talk about it. I appreciate you being so willing to be open and transparent with everything. I know people really appreciate that as they're thinking through things on their end. So I appreciate you coming on.
No, thank you. I really appreciate it.
And I hope to have you on season 9, and you can tell us about how you're like a multi-million-dollar operation just dominating the market.
Yeah, we'll let you know how it's going. It's either that or it's just not that. So we'll have to wait and see.
Either that or it's not that. Truer words have never been spoken. So Cool, man. All right. Well, thanks again, and I'll talk to you later.
All right, see you.